Hey gang, Chase here, and today we're going to be discussing interviews. Now, interviews are one of the most common types of shoots that you'll be asked to do, but nailing them isn't always easy, so we've come up with 7 simple steps that will help keep your interview shoot running smoothly. There are several things you should consider when assessing the environment so that you can make the most of it. First, does the space even fit the look and feel of your piece? If you can, try to use surroundings to help you tell the story. There are also some practical concerns to address. Does your location's look change at all? Things like sunlight coming through windows or clocks framed in your shot are things that are constantly changing and can cause continuity issues in your final piece. Distracting audio in the environment can also ruin an interview, so consider the ambient noise of the space that you're in. Things like an air conditioner turning on and off, loud traffic outside, or even a plane passing overhead are things that can dominate a soundbite or ruin an edit between 2 clips. Next, consider if you have enough floor space to work properly. Keep in mind that you'll be packing cameras, lights, crew, and your subject into the location. Do you have enough room to separate your subject from the background that they're in front of? Can the height of the ceilings accommodate your lights? All important things to consider. Investigating the power situation is very important. Ensure that there are sufficient outlets to run your equipment from. I always like to have stingers so that I can reach outlets in a different area, and power strips and triple taps so that I can multiply the outlets that I have. Just remember to tape the cables to the ground so that no one trips over them. Also, be aware of the building's circuitry. Other buildings, for example, may not be well suited for the amount of power that studio lights draw, and you could blow a circuit. Blowing a circuit is always something to keep in mind, so try to have an idea of where you can find that fuse box should you need to get to it. So, for the purposes of this video, we'll be shooting in a studio, which has everything we need for a proper interview, and will help us illustrate the remaining steps a little better. Once you have your space, the next step is to compose your main shot. Now, there are a million different ways to compose your shot, way too many to cover in a short video. So let's take a look at the shot we're setting up here and discuss our approach. Now, whether we're wider to reveal more background or in tight to capture an intimate moment, we always want to frame the subject to the opposite side that they're looking. Here you can see the subject is framed left with look room to the right to establish the subject's eye line. Try to have your interviewer sit right next to the camera. This keeps your subject looking just off to the side. Too far to the side can look awkward. Another option would be to have the subject look directly into the camera, which can help immerse the viewer and give the impression that the subject is speaking directly to them. In this situation, we would place our subject in the center of the frame. We've set the camera height at eye level because it's a good neutral base. You could shoot down on the subject to help hide a double chin, or use that angle creatively to make them appear weak or small. You could shoot up at a subject to hide a shiny bald spot, or use that creatively to portray them as powerful or domineering. Next, we compose the shot so that the background works for us and is pleasing. It's just a plain black background with no extraneous light on it. If you have a background that's distracting and competes with your subject, you may want to pull the subject further away from it to create more depth, throwing it out of focus. This same rule can be applied to an extra camera angle. Running a second camera during an interview can be extremely helpful later in the edit room. A good rule of thumb that I use is to offset my B camera about 30 degrees from my main angle to make the cuts between the two feel seamless. But going as far to the side as a profile can still be effective. Ensure that both your camera settings are matched up and you're all good to go. The standard approach to lighting interviews is known as 3-point lighting. It's by no means the only way to light an interview, but it's a great place to begin. 3-point lighting, as the name suggests, consists of 3 points of light. You have the key light, which is your main source of illumination. You have the fill, which controls the contrast on your subject by filling in the shadows created by the key. As you can see, the fill doesn't always have to be a light. It could be something that bounces light. And lastly, the backlight, or edge light, helps separate your subject from the background. There are a variety of tools you can use that can help you shape and model these lights. Softboxes, silks, and pieces of diffusion can be added to a light to spread and soften the beam. These are very common go-to for key lights in interviews because they create a softer look on the face. Flags or cutters allow us to block the light off of certain areas. Great for cutting excess light off the background, for example. Most bounce boards actually have a black side as well, which can be used for negative fill. Let's say you're in a very bright room that's bouncing light everywhere. Use some negative fill to control it. Nets are cloth scrims that reduce the intensity of a source without diffusing it. Very helpful if you can't move your light any further back, but you need to weaken its intensity. And of course, there's all manner of color gels to help color correct to the look you're going for. Sometimes I like to put a little bit of blue on my edge light just to make a little difference in the lighting. And finally, there are reflectors and bounce boards, which can be very useful as subtle fill, like we're using here. When conducting interviews, there are 3 types of mics that you typically see. The first is the dynamic or stick mic, which is usually found in newscasts and man-on-the-street type interviews. These mics are useful because they're very robust, and they have a cardioid pickup pattern, which picks up sound primarily in the front and reduces ambient noise pollution that may be happening around it. But you rarely see them used in seated formal interviews. It's much more common to see a lavalier or lapel mic on set. These are great because they can be clipped onto the subject and hidden fairly easily. Here we have a wired one, but they can be wireless, which is very convenient if you're doing a lot of moving around. These mics typically have an omnidirectional pickup pattern, which means they pick up sounds from all around. And since they're clipped to the subject's clothing, you're more likely to pick up a clean signal from their voice with very little ambience. And lastly is the shotgun mic or boom mic. These are another great choice for interviews because they have a cardioid or sometimes even a hypercardioid pickup pattern, which means that they're very sensitive at the front of the mic, but won't pick up much else. Just be sure to aim the mic at your subject's mouth. One great strategy is to split your audio channels between a lav and a shotgun. That way you can get a stereo signal, but if one mic fails, you're still covered. Alright, now this step is short and sweet, but it's a step that's overlooked by many filmmakers today. Do a sound and picture test. That should always be the last thing that you do before you actually start rolling your interview. If you record 30 seconds of video and 30 seconds of audio, you can play them back and make sure that there's no issues with your equipment. Also, you might catch something. Sometimes things like water bottles, C-stands, shadows, or boom mics can appear in your shot, and you never know it until you pull it onto your computer and take a closer look. The importance of this step cannot be overstated, because an interviewee must not only give engaging answers, they have to be worded in a way that is conducive to your piece. So, the first step is to make sure that your subject is comfortable and relaxed. Have them arrive early for the interview and have a chat with them while the crew sets up. This will help you establish a rapport and put them at ease. This next point may seem like a no-brainer, but know your subject. Do your research and prepare your questions in advance. Remember to be present during the interview because it's not about getting through all your questions, it's about listening to what your subject has to say and building off that. Make sure that you avoid asking yes or no questions. In fact, it's a good idea to ask your subject if they can repeat the question in their answer. Trust me, this will save you when it comes time to edit. Also, allow some dead space in between their answers. The last thing you want is to have an answer be unusable because you can be heard responding to it or asking the next question. And there you have it. Remember to make the space work for you. Properly set up your cameras and lights, choose the right microphone, do your test, and know your subject. Follow these 7 steps and you'll be well on your way to conducting more successful interviews.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.